The vast theater of the Second World War encompassed not only massive battleships and complex human strategies, but also the smallest, most unexpected heroes. Amidst the immense conflict that raged across the Pacific, particularly in the unforgiving jungles of New Guinea, a tiny Yorkshire Terrier emerged, forging an extraordinary legacy that redefined the role animals could play in human conflict and recovery. This dog, named Smoky, became far more than a simple mascot. She was a combat companion, a crucial engineering asset, and the pioneering figure in what would later be formally recognized as animal-assisted therapy. Her story is a testament to the powerful, often overlooked bond between soldiers and the creatures who shared their hardships, offering a vital source of comfort and morale when survival itself was uncertain. The narrative of Smoky and her handler, Corporal Bill Wynne, is deeply intertwined with the logistical realities and emotional toll of the Allied campaign against Japanese forces in the Pacific. Their journey began by chance in the brutal tropical environment of New Guinea in 1944 and stretched across the critical island-hopping progression from Australia to Biak, the Philippines, Okinawa, and finally to Korea. Ultimately, Smoky's actions during the war cemented her place in history, showcasing that courage and compassion come in all sizes, profoundly influencing military and medical perspectives long after the conflict concluded. Her experiences provide a unique lens through which to examine the human need for connection and emotional resilience amidst the chaos of global war. The context of war and the theory of mascots. To fully appreciate Smoky's remarkable contributions, it is essential to understand the grim environment in which her story unfolded. The Pacific Theater of Operations presented uniquely difficult challenges, characterized by fierce jungle warfare, tropical diseases, and relentless heat. The New Guinea campaign, lasting from January 1942 until August 1945, was strategically vital. Japan had invaded the Australian territory of New Guinea and the territory of Papua in 1942, seizing western New Guinea as well. This occupation, positioned just north of Australia, represented a significant threat to Allied operations and the continent of Australia itself. The effort to recapture and secure these locations required immense coordination, including critical airborne operations. An early vital component of this effort was the capture of Nadzab, New Guinea. On September 5, 1943, the Allies launched an airborne operation specifically to secure Nadzab's important airfield, which was destined to become a major Allied airbase. This operation involved both U.S. Army forces, specifically the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment, and the Australian Army, including the 2/4th Field Regiment. Ground troops such as the 2/2nd Pioneer Battalion and B Company Papuan Infantry Battalion also advanced overland to the site. After the area was secured and the airfield prepared, an Allied transport plane landed the following day, confirming the success of the initial mission. It was within this operational framework that Corporal Bill Wynne arrived. Drafted in 1943, Bill trained with the U.S. Army Air Force, the USAAF, as an aerial photographer and attended mapping school. His unit embarked for Australia in a Liberty ship in December 1943. After arriving in Brisbane later that month, Bill and hundreds of other soldiers continued their journey aboard the SS Contessa, an ironclad wooden vessel which transported them onward to New Guinea. Bill was assigned to the Aerial Photography Laboratory of the 5th USAAF 26th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron, stationed at the Hollandia Airfield Complex near Nadzab, New Guinea. By April 1944, Bill had been selected to fly combat missions as an aerial photographer. The role of the 26th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron was indispensable and fraught with danger. Their primary mission was intelligence gathering. The photo reconnaissance planes, sometimes nicknamed the Spies in the Sky, flew without escorts and, crucially, without armament for protection. Their flights were dedicated to photographing Japanese military installations, coastal defenses, harbor facilities, and airfields. This vital information was essential for the planning of subsequent Allied operations. The squadron was highly mobile, relocating as the front lines advanced, moving from Australia to New Guinea, then to Mockmare Airfield on Biak Island in the Netherlands East Indies, followed by Linguane Airfield in Luzon, Philippines, Kadena Airfield in Okinawa, and finally to Kimpo Airfield in Korea. Within this environment of constant movement, high risk, and intense tropical conditions, the need for morale boosters became paramount. Military units often adopted mascots, which served as a focus point for camaraderie and a temporary diversion from the brutal realities of war. This need for connection ties into the broader, though not often much more formalized theory of animal support during conflict. Even before the United States formally entered World War II, programs like Dogs for Defense were initiated after the attack on Pearl Harbor. This military program asked pet owners across the nation to donate their dogs for essential military roles, specifically patrol and guard duties. While Smoky was not formally part of this program, her existence highlighted the inherent, almost universal benefits of the human-animal bond in high-stress environments. The theoretical underpinning of Smoky's impact goes beyond simple mascothood. It touches on the psychological necessity of familiarity and emotional consistency in unfamiliar and hostile settings. When Bill Wynne first acquired Smoky, the reality of caring for a dog in the jungle was immediately apparent. Daily necessities like finding food and maintaining hygiene became miniature challenges in themselves. Bill had to bathe Smoky daily in his helmet to protect her from ticks and insects. Lacking standard dog food, he discovered her preference for soldier rations like bacon, ham, eggs, and bully beef, canned hash. This care routine, necessary for Smoky's survival, created a structured, comforting activity for Bill, diverting his focus, if only briefly, from the war. Crucially, Smoky was an exceptionally bright dog, responding with enthusiasm to specific words and quickly mastering commands and tricks. This intelligence allowed Bill and Smoky to develop coordinated shows for people at the base, transforming the dog from a companion into a performer and rapidly into a crucial fixture of the squadron's social life. This ability to entertain and engage, to bring smiles and temporary release, was the foundation of her future transformative role as a true therapy dog. The immediate joy she brought to the troops confirmed the powerful psychological theory that animals can be critical facilitators of human emotional health, particularly during times of extreme stress.
Main analysis: From Foundling to War Dog Hero. The remarkable partnership of Bill Wynne and Smoky began in the jungle near Hollandia in March 1944. The circumstances of her discovery are shrouded in mystery, leading to continued speculation about her origins. Bill's tent mate, Ed Downey, found the dog while driving on a rugged jungle road. His Jeep had broken down and, while working on the vehicle, he heard an unfamiliar noise. Investigating the sound, he located a small dog, scratching in the dirt at the base of a foxhole. Downey brought the dog back to the airbase and gave her to Sergeant Dare, a mechanic at Hollandia Airfield. When Bill first saw the tiny dog, he was immediately captivated. As an ardent dog lover, he offered Dare 2 Australian pounds for her. Dare initially countered with 3 pounds. Bill hesitated, contemplating the immense difficulty of properly caring for a dog in the harsh jungle environment, and he left without completing the transaction. However, the following day, Sergeant Dare, clearly needing funds, sought Bill out at the photo lab. He offered to sell the tiny dog for the originally proposed 2 Australian pounds, which was equivalent to $6.44 in US currency at the time, explaining he needed the money to rejoin a poker game. This time, Bill agreed. He named her Smoky, marking the start of their lifelong partnership. The mystery of Smoky's origin would later be illuminated, though Bill did not know it at the time. Years after the war, a woman named Grace Guderian Heidenreich, a U.S. Army nurse stationed in New Guinea in early 1944, contacted Bill. Her fiancé had purchased a Yorkshire Terrier for her from a Brisbane veterinarian as a Christmas holiday gift, leading her to name the dog Christmas. Grace's little dog, Christmas, disappeared when she attended a Bob Hope USO show in New Guinea. When she shared photos and combined her story with Bill's, he concluded that the little dog found in the foxhole was in fact the same missing Yorkshire Terrier. This confirmed the intense excitement Smoky displayed when Bill tested words like Christmas during early training sessions. The first documented therapy dog. Smoky's transition from a unit mascot to a documented therapeutic presence occurred during a personal crisis for Bill Wynne. In July 1944, Bill developed a high fever, reaching 105 degrees, and was subsequently diagnosed with dengue fever, a tropical disease carried by mosquitoes. He was admitted to the U.S. 233rd Field Hospital in Nadzab. While he was hospitalized, his friends managed to smuggle Smoky in, bearing good news. Smoky had won the contest run by the military publication Yanks Down Under for the best mascot of the Southwest Pacific area. This recognition proved highly beneficial. When nurses discovered Smoky, they were immediately overwhelmed and asked if they could take her on their rounds to help cheer up the patients. This required the permission of the commanding officer, Dr. Charles W. Mayo, whose family was among the founders of the renowned Mayo Clinic. Dr. Mayo observed the profound effect the dog had on everyone she encountered, noting how she brought smiles to all who interacted with her. Her new fame as best mascot undoubtedly aided the decision. Permission was granted, and while Bill recuperated, Smoky was allowed to sleep in his bed, being picked up every morning by the nurses to conduct morale-boosting rounds and returned to him at the close of the day. Following his discharge, Bill and Smoky were granted recuperative leave in Brisbane by his squadron doctor, Dr. Beryl D. Rosenberg. It was in Australia that their hospital work formalized. Barbara Wood Smith, the assistant field director with the American Red Cross, asked Bill to bring Smoky to the U.S. Navy 109th Fleet Hospital. This marked the first instance where they put on a meticulously planned show, performing for patients across 8 wards that single day. The success was immediate. Patients and staff were delighted. Barbara Wood Smith then requested a visit to the Brisbane U.S. Army 42nd General Hospital. There, Bill and Smoky performed in 12 wards. The tiny dog proved incredibly effective, delivering smiles and joy to audiences of troops who were injured, wounded, homesick, and weary from the ongoing war. The impact was so significant that Barbara Wood Smith wrote a thank you letter on official American Red Cross stationery addressed directly to CPL, Corporal Smoky, in September 1944. This letter provides invaluable insight into Smoky's immediate therapeutic role. Smith noted that patients, some of whom had been confined to beds for months, had become exhausted merely by looking at the 4 walls and other sailors. Smith emphasized that laughter is crucial for recovery, stating that Smoky certainly administered enough of it here to improve the health of any number of our boys. She praised Smoky's tireless work ethic, calling her the almost unheard-of combination, a lady artiste without temperament. She pointed out that Smoky entertained across 8 wards in one afternoon, remaining just as energized and cooperative at the end of the tour. The patients particularly loved Smoky's dead dog act and her speed when responding to Bill's command. The Red Cross recognized her value explicitly, calling her a wonderful morale builder and wished for her to continue the good work both abroad and later at Bill's home in Cleveland.
The danger of reconnaissance and rescue. After their 2 weeks of successful morale work in Australia, Bill returned to his squadron, which had advanced to Biak Island following its capture from the Japanese. The Battle of Biak, which occurred between May 27 and August 17, 1944, was an Allied triumph, resulting in the acquisition of a highly strategic airfield, renamed Mockmer Airfield. This base was crucial for the Allies as they prepared for the invasion of the Philippines. In September 1944, Bill accepted a new assignment that moved him from the relative security of the photo lab into the skies. He began flying missions with the 3rd Emergency Rescue Squadron, tasked with searching for downed pilots. His inaugural mission placed him in a Stinson L-5 Sentinel, a small plane crewed only by a pilot and a photographer. These aircraft often flew dangerously low, sometimes just 50 feet above the ground to survey battle sites. During this first mission, they located a crash site. They circled 3 times, confirming that the plane had dived into the ground and a tree had ripped off the cockpit. Bill took photographs to document the crash and confirmed there were no survivors. The inherent dangers of this type of flying were immediately apparent to Bill's friends. Upon his return, they asked the stark question of who would inherit Smoky if Bill failed to return from a mission. Recognizing the psychological need for reassurance,
Bill ensured Smoky joined him on subsequent missions. For his second and all future missions, Bill and Smoky flew aboard a PBY Catalina, an amphibious aircraft known as a flying boat. The Catalina served multiple functions, including reconnaissance, search and rescue, anti-submarine warfare, convoy escort, maritime patrol, and cargo transport. On combat missions, the crews affectionately nicknamed the aircraft Cat and Dumbo during air-sea rescues. The standard crew included 7 personnel: a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, engineer-mechanic, radio operator, and 2 medics. Bill and Smoky were added. Bill successfully argued that Smoky was a valuable mascot who would bring the crew good luck, and they readily accepted her presence. Smoky generally traveled secured inside a canvas moosehead bag, a type of knapsack. However, when there was no immediate combat or rescue action, she was occasionally allowed to run around the plane. Bill's memoir, Yorkie Doodle Dandy, recounts one mission that highlighted the unpredictable element of wartime fortune. Bill and Smoky were already secured in the plane, prepared to embark on a rescue mission targeting 6 men floating in a raft. At the last moment, a decision was made to substitute an extra medic for the photographer. Bill and Smoky were removed from the flight. Bill later learned that the aircraft and the men it was meant to rescue had all vanished. Bill recognized this near miss as a profound blessing. The definitive act of a war dog. As WWII continued its relentless progression, the 26th Photo Recon Unit relocated to the Philippines. It was here, Bill Wynne stated, that Smoky definitively transitioned from merely a pet companion into a true war dog. The incident that cemented her status occurred at Lingayen Gulf, Philippines in January 1945. The crucial problem facing the Allies was the need to string communication lines under an airstrip runway. The infrastructure required running the line through a 70-foot-long culvert. Engineers estimated the sheer scope of the task. Without a successful method to utilize the culvert, the job would demand approximately 3 days of digging, requiring about 70 men. Critically, this necessary excavation would have shut down the airfield, halting all Allied planes during a period of daily dangerous air attacks by the Japanese. The engineers recognized that exposing 70 men for 3 days in such a vulnerable position meant that many lives could potentially be lost. Smoky provided the unprecedented solution. Bill, witnessing the crisis, tied a string which was attached to the communication wire to Smoky's collar. He then ran to the opposite end of the 70-foot culvert. Initially, Smoky was hesitant, taking a few steps in before retreating. Bill called to her, "Come, Smoky," and she cautiously started through the long, dark tunnel again. When she was about 10 feet inside, the string snagged, stopping her progress. Bill recalled that she looked over her shoulder, seeming to question what was hindering her movement. Once the string loosened from the obstruction, she continued the arduous crawl. As she moved deeper, the dust began to rise from the continuous shuffle of her paws across the dirt and mold, soon obscuring her completely from Bill's sight. Bill continued to call and plead, uncertain if she was still moving forward or had stopped. Finally, when she was about 20 feet away, he spotted her. He saw 2 small amber eyes emerge, accompanied by a faint whimpering sound. In the last 15 feet, she broke into a run, successfully emerging with the guide string. Smoky completed this absolutely vital mission in approximately 3 minutes. The relief and elation among the men were palpable. They were overjoyed by Smoky's success, showering her with praise and affection for a full 5 minutes. Her actions saved the lives of potentially dozens of men, preserved critical operational time, and allowed the airfield to remain open during intense combat operations.
Following this pivotal moment, Bill and Smoky continued their work, not just within the squadron, but in the growing network of military hospitals. Whenever his duties and time permitted, Bill took Smoky to visit patients. They also held shows for people residing near the base, including children's groups, regardless of which location the 26th Photo Recon was stationed at. In June 1945, the hospital visits continued in Manila, Philippines, specifically at the U.S. Army 120th General Hospital. A notable photograph from this time shows Smoky, Bill Wynne, a hospital patient, and, significantly, Barbara Wood Smith, the American Red Cross worker who had earlier written the heartfelt letter to Smoky in Brisbane. This continuity highlights the sustained nature of Smoky's morale work throughout the various stages of the war. The journey home and the fight for acceptance. The 26th Photo Recon Squadron concluded its operational service by moving on from the Philippines to Okinawa and then to Korea. The war officially ended, and on November 1, 1945, the squadron received orders for their return trip to the United States aboard the USS General William H. Gordon. This presented Bill with his greatest challenge yet, a strict, though perhaps only rumored, U.S. Army regulation prohibiting animals from being transported back to the U.S. on a War Department ship. Bill knew he could not abandon his partner. Determined to bring Smoky home, he devised a meticulous plan to smuggle her aboard. He hid Smoky inside an oxygen-carrying case. She remained completely silent and undetected as she was brought aboard, and the case was not inspected. Bill secured a top bunk in a corner of the ship's quarters where the bunks were stacked 5 high. The next morning, after 5,000 men had been loaded onto the ship, an announcement was made demanding that any man who had brought a dog aboard report immediately to the troop office. Bill chose not to respond. He later learned that his friend, Randall, had responded, bringing his dog, Duke. Randall was ordered to remove Duke from the ship. However, fate intervened. As Randall was leaving the troop office, a sailor approached him, offering to hide Duke in the ship's hold. The sailor explained that he was already concealing 2 other dogs and could easily fit in a third. The ship then set sail from Incheon Harbor, Korea, heading toward Washington State. Early in the voyage, the vessel encountered rough seas, causing Bill to become severely seasick. He spent days confined to his bunk. In a display of true solidarity, men from the 26th Photo Recon Squadron would sneak Smoky up to the upper deck for necessary potty breaks, forming a protective ring around her as they walked to keep her hidden from official view. However, the concealment did not last. Another announcement was broadcast, this one more urgent, requiring all men who had brought dogs or monkeys aboard the ship to report the ship's office immediately. Despite his ongoing sickness, Bill struggled to the troop office and was surprised to find 5 other guilty men already gathered there. Bill retreated back to his bunk, vowing to keep Smoky hidden. But a U.S. Navy officer, who was actually searching for someone else entirely, stumbled upon the dog. The officer asked Bill if the dog was officially registered to be on the ship, to which Bill had to admit no. An hour later, Bill was summoned to the ship's office. He apologized for his delayed reporting, citing his illness. This was Bill's moment to plead Smoky's case based on her verifiable service record. He presented photos of Smoky entertaining the sick and wounded. He showed them the official letter from the Red Cross, thanking both Bill and Smoky for their invaluable contribution to patient morale. He also highlighted Smoky's 1944 selection as the best mascot of the Southwest Pacific area. The officers informed Bill that while he might be allowed to bring Smoky into the U.S., he would potentially need to pay a bond, which could cost up to $1,000. Bill immediately accepted the terms. Following this agreement, Bill and the ship's captain signed a formal document, a Declaration of Domestic Animal, dated November 4, 1945, which legally cleared the ship of any responsibility for the dog. With Smoky officially recognized and no longer required to hide, Bill and Smoky seized the opportunity to put on several shows for the thousands of men on board performing on the ship's deck. Bill noticed that both the ship's captain and the troop commander would sometimes watch these shows from the bridge, often with smiles on their faces. Furthermore, the official acceptance meant that the sailors responsible for hiding Duke were able to bring him up from the hold every day to play with Smoky. The USS William H. Gordon docked in Seattle, Washington on November 13, 1945. As Bill and Smoky traveled by train toward his home in Ohio, their story began to spread. One train stop, a man from the United Services Organization, the USO, saw Bill carrying the small dog. After hearing their tale, the man contacted the Indianapolis Star, which published a story that was quickly picked up by a wire service, initiating national recognition for the small war dog. Bill and Smoky finally arrived home in Cleveland, Ohio on November 30, 1945.
Results and discussion. The enduring legacy of the Yorkshire Terrier. Smoky's return home marked not the end of her service, but a pivot point in her career, establishing her permanent place in the history of animal-assisted intervention. The media immediately embraced the story. A week after Bill's arrival, the Cleveland Press interviewed him, running a front-page story on December 7, 1945, headlined, "Tiny Dog Home from the War." National attention followed, with the New York Daily News, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun, and Herald America all publishing their own stories about the remarkable dog. In their personal lives, Bill married Margie Roberts, the woman to whom he had given an engagement ring before leaving for war in 1943. They were married on September 28, 1946. Professionally, the partnership between Bill and Smoky continued its dedicated service to the public. They maintained a busy schedule entertaining people after the war, performing shows at veterans' hospitals, schools, orphanages, nursing homes, hospitals, and various other organizations. Smoky's appeal was so broad that in the summer of 1946, from June to August, Bill was hired by the Cleveland Zoo to serve as the master of ceremonies for a traveling circus, with Smoky starring as one of the featured acts. While a brief attempt to secure a job in Hollywood, training dogs for motion pictures, did not materialize, Bill and Smoky returned to Ohio. Bill took a job at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, which later transformed into NASA in 1958, working as part of a crew testing new de-icing equipment for aircraft. As live television became popular in 1947, Bill and Smoky seamlessly adapted their act. They became fixtures on a Cleveland children's show called Castles in the Air. As Bill and Margie's family grew, Bill eventually accepted a new position in 1953 with The Plain Dealer, a Cleveland newspaper, starting as a photographer. He later became a celebrated photojournalist, a role he maintained for 31 years, earning numerous international, national, and local awards, and even achieving finalist status for the Pulitzer Prize in 1973. The first therapy dog, an enduring memorial. Smoky passed away peacefully in her sleep on February 21, 1957. Bill found her in her bed when he returned home from work. He described himself as inconsolable following her death. Margie suggested they bury the little dog near Our Tree, a gray beech tree in the Cleveland Metro Park System's Rocky River Reservation, where Bill and Margie had carved their initials in 1940. The next day, Bill, Margie, and their children located the tree. With Smoky's body placed inside a shoebox, they buried her. Their 7-year-old daughter, Susan, voiced a poignant, innocent worry, asking, "Daddy, Daddy, how is Smoky going to breathe?" Bill reassured her that Smoky was safe in dog heaven and no longer needed to breathe. A writer for The Plain Dealer, Josephine Robertson, wrote a comprehensive obituary for Smoky, recounting her full wartime story. It was this obituary that led to the crucial confirmation of Smoky's origins by Grace Guderian Heidenreich, the former Army nurse whose lost dog, Christmas, was determined to be Smoky. The convergence of these stories provided closure on the long-standing mystery of how a tiny Yorkshire Terrier came to be scratching in a foxhole in the New Guinea jungle. The most significant aspect of Smoky's discussion phase centers on her formal recognition. Smoky is officially recognized as the first documented therapy dog. Her trailblazing work began informally in 1944 in New Guinea, offering comfort and cheer to the patients suffering from tropical diseases and combat injuries, and continued throughout the rest of the war. Bill and Smoky carried on this crucial work long after the war's conclusion, cementing her role as the foundational figure in the therapeutic use of animals in healthcare settings. Bill Wynne himself reflected on the depth of their relationship, stating that Smoky ultimately taught him much more than he had taught her. The physical manifestation of her legacy was realized years later. Margie Wynne passed away in 2004. In 2003, Bill was informed that a permanent monument would be erected to honor Smoky near the very spot she was buried in the Rocky River Reservation Metropolitan Park. Bill spent hours searching for the grave and eventually located the now fallen beech tree with their carved initials, which led him to the exact burial site. Smoky's remains were respectfully transferred into a World War II .30 caliber ammunition case. The monument, dedicated to Smoky and symbolizing dogs of all wars, was unveiled on Veterans Day, November 11, 2005, marking her final resting place. Bill Wynne passed away on April 19, 2021. Global recognition and honors. Smoky's story resonated globally, resulting in a remarkable array of posthumous honors from various organizations and nations, emphasizing her dual role as a combat hero and a therapeutic pioneer. The Australian Defence Force Trackers and War Dogs Association recognized her operational value by awarding Smoky the War Dog Operational Medal in 2010. Years later, the Australian War Dog Museum in Sydney presented her with the Australian War Dog Medal in 2014. This award was specifically backdated, making it the first combat medal officially awarded to a dog. The Australian Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals conferred the prestigious Purple Cross upon Smoky on December 11, 2015. This is an exceedingly rare and high honor designated for animal war heroes. Over 163 years, Smoky became only the 10th animal ever to receive the Purple Cross, underscoring the extraordinary nature of her service.
Recognition also spanned international boundaries and diverse institutions. The Ohio Veterinary Medicine Association inducted her into their Animal Hall of Fame in Columbus, Ohio in 1995. The Imperial War Museum in London, England, displayed Smoky's war blanket as part of an Animals of War exhibit from November 2006 to May 2007. The World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana, featured a bronze statue of Smoky wearing a helmet in 2010, also as part of an exhibit dedicated to animals of war. Further honors included the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals Certificate of Bravery and Devotion from England in 2011. Even the military units that succeeded her squadron paid tribute. Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, home to the successor unit, the 26th Airspace Intelligence Squadron, displayed Smoky's memorabilia in 2003. The Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital in Australia paid tribute in 2012, recognizing her early work in their region. Her significance in the campaign history was also recognized in Papua New Guinea in 2015. Smoky's story, which began with her rescue from a foxhole, has since been preserved in detailed literary works. Bill Wynne himself authored a book, Yorkie Noodle Dandy, or The Other Woman Was a Real Dog, providing an in-depth account written by her best friend. Another valuable volume, Smoky, The Dog That Saved My Life, The Bill Wynne Story by Nancy Rowe Pym, was written in consultation with Bill Wynne, ensuring the accuracy and comprehensiveness of the historical record.
Conclusion, key takeaways, and reflections. The life and service of Smoky, the Yorkshire Terrier, offer a compelling case study in loyalty, utility, and the profound therapeutic power of the human-animal bond during wartime. Her journey from a tiny, abandoned dog found scratching in the dirt near Hollandia Airfield, New Guinea, to becoming the first documented therapy dog represents a legacy unmatched by most military animals. The strategic context of the Pacific War, particularly the vulnerability of the 26th Photo Recon Squadron flying unescorted reconnaissance missions, underscored the dangerous environment Bill Wynne operated in. Smoky provided a stable, emotional anchor, mitigating the psychological strain of combat. This emotional support transcended mere companionship, proving indispensable to Bill, particularly during his time suffering from dengue fever. Smoky's therapeutic value was demonstrated repeatedly and formally acknowledged long before modern medicine fully embraced animal-assisted interventions. Her performances in military hospitals across Nodzab, Brisbane, and Manila were not just entertainment, they were recognized by the American Red Cross and hospital commanders like Dr. Charles W. Mayo as a vital form of psychological medicine administering laughter to aid recovery. However, her status as a true war dog was solidified by her technical contribution at Langayan Gulf. By successfully running a communication line through a 70-foot culvert in 3 minutes, she saved 3 days of dangerous manual labor that would have risked the lives of 70 men and temporarily shut down a critical Allied airfield under daily Japanese attack. This single act showcased her unique utility and intelligence under pressure. The challenges Bill faced in smuggling Smoky back to the United States highlight the depth of their commitment, ultimately forcing the U.S. Army to formally acknowledge her service and permit her entry, recognizing her as an exception worthy of the possible $1,000 bond. In reflection, Smoky's enduring legacy is measured not just in her ability to perform tricks or her combat utility, but in the array of high honors she received years after her death. The Australian Purple Cross, one of the rarest awards for animal heroes, and her continuing memorialization in museums and memorials across the US, UK, and Australia confirm that her story is a permanent fixture in the history of World War II and the evolution of care for veterans.
Her life serves as a constant reminder that courage and comfort often manifest in the most humble and unexpected forms.
Detailed exploration of the morale and therapeutic function. The term mascot often diminishes the actual psychological and practical roles animals play in military environments. In Smoky's case, her function evolved far beyond simply representing the squadron. Her initial contribution stemmed from the simple domestic routines she instilled in Bill Wynne's chaotic life. In a hostile jungle environment where disease and warfare were constant threats, the need to give Smoky a daily bath and a helmet, or to secure non-standard rations like bully beef for her, forced Bill into a pattern of predictable, nurturing behavior. This routine provided a vital psychological break and sense of normalcy that counteracted the surrounding trauma. The true scope of her therapeutic impact became obvious when Bill contracted dengue fever. When Smoky was covertly brought into the U.S. 233rd Field Hospital in Nadzab, her presence immediately altered the emotional landscape of the ward. The nurses instantly recognized this transformative effect. The decision by Dr. Charles W. Mayo, whose familial connection to the Mayo Clinic gave weight to his observation, to allow Smoky to stay and participate in rounds was revolutionary for the time. This formalized institutional permission for an animal to interact with sick and wounded soldiers, with the explicit goal of elevating spirits and aiding recovery, retroactively justifies her title as the first documented therapy dog. The detailed account of their hospital visits in Brisbane, facilitated by the American Red Cross, provides hard evidence of this impact. Performing in 8 wards at the U.S. Navy 109th Fleet Hospital and 12 wards at the U.S. Army 42nd General Hospital was physically demanding, yet Smoky showed no temperament. The Red Cross staff observed that the laughter she generated was a measurable health benefit. As Barbara Wood Smith wrote, Smoky delivered joy to men who were very tired of looking at nothing but 4 walls. This insight highlights a fundamental psychological truth of long-term hospitalization. The monotony and isolation can be as debilitating as the physical injury itself. Smoky provided a non-judgmental, external point of focus, a link to a happier, pre-war reality. The continuity of this work is also crucial. Smoky did not just visit a few hospitals. She toured throughout the Pacific, performing for patients and the local communities wherever the 26th Photo Recon landed, including Manila. This sustained effort over years solidified the operational necessity of her morale work. The feedback loop was clear. Smoky helped the troops, which in turn increased her value and acceptance within the formal military structure, ultimately culminating in official leniency during the critical phase of transporting her back to the U.S. Expansion. Deep dive into combat and practical utility. While Smoky's therapy work is foundational to her legacy, her practical role in combat logistics confirms her war dog status, distinguishing her from other historical mascots. The moment Bill declared she moved from pet companion to war dog was centered on the life-saving feat at Lingayen Gulf. The strategic importance of this single operation cannot be overstated. The 26th Photo Recon Squadron relied on immediate, reliable communication for their intelligence missions. Disrupting the runway for 3 days to dig trenches through concrete and dirt to lay communication wire would have been catastrophic. It would have created an operational gap, hindering the Allied offensive, and placing the large digging team in extreme danger of Japanese air raids, which were occurring daily. The culvert itself was a nightmare passage, 70 feet long, narrow, dark, filled with dirt and mold. For a tiny Yorkshire Terrier, navigating this distance was an immense physical challenge, compounded by the psychological stress of total darkness and isolation. When the string snagged, Smoky did not panic. She paused, looked back, and continued once the obstruction cleared. Bill Wynne's description of calling and pleading into the dark tunnel captures the tense, life-or-death atmosphere of those 3 minutes. The emergence of her 2 little amber eyes symbolized the success that bypassed an enormous logistical obstacle. This action saved critical resources, manpower, and most importantly, potentially scores of lives. Smoky's earlier involvement in aerial rescue missions also contributes to her combat record. Although she traveled in a musette bag inside the PBY Catalina, she was an integral part of the 3rd Emergency Rescue Squadron crew. The PBY Catalina was a multi-role aircraft used frequently in high-risk zones, hunting submarines and searching battle sites. Bill's near miss, where he was unexpectedly replaced by a medic on a flight that vanished, underscores the constant, fatal threat inherent in these missions. Smoky's presence, described by Bill as bringing good luck, provided a crucial element of superstition and comfort to a crew frequently dealing with loss and dangerous search patterns. She was physically present in the war zone, experiencing the flights that sometimes flew as low as 50 feet over enemy territory. Expansion, post-war public life, and the literary record. The seamless transition from war service to public life established a powerful narrative that sustained Smoky's fame for decades. Her media coverage started immediately upon arrival in the U.S., recognized as a hero by major metropolitan newspapers. Smoky and Bill leveraged this fame to continue their commitment to veterans. Their post-war entertainment performances, whether at veterans' hospitals, nursing homes, or schools, were a civilian extension of her military therapy work. This consistent visibility ensured that her story was passed down through various communities, including children who watched her on Cleveland's early television show, Castles in the Air. Smoky's influence on Bill Wynne's civilian career is also a remarkable outcome. As a photographer and later a renowned photojournalist for the Plain Dealer, Bill spent decades documenting human stories. His ability to capture emotion and narrative, skills perhaps honed by his aerial reconnaissance work, found new focus through his partnership with Smoky. The platform Smoky provided, even in her post-war status, likely amplified Bill's own visibility and career trajectory, leading to national recognition for his photojournalism. The preservation of Smoky's memory through literature ensures her permanent historical placement. Bill Wynne's memoir, Yorkie Doodle Dandy, acts as the primary source, detailing the unique emotional complexities of their bond, as indicated by the subtitle, "The Other Woman Was a Real Dog." These personal accounts are crucial because they offer the emotional context missing from official military records, transforming statistics and operational details into a deeply felt human story of friendship and dedication. The later publication, Smoky, The Dog That Saved My Life, co-authored in consultation with Wynne, further cemented the details of her service, particularly focusing on the most dramatic episodes, like the Culvert rescue. Expansion, the significance of posthumous honors. The array of awards Smoky received, many decades after her death in 1957, signifies a retrospective understanding of her unique contributions. The fact that multiple international bodies, including defense forces and veterinarian associations, felt compelled to honor her, underscores her universal appeal and operational impact. The Australian War Dog Medal, backdated to be the first combat medal awarded to a dog by the Australian War Dog Museum, is a direct acknowledgement of her logistical role in the Pacific Theatre, where Australian forces played a significant part in the campaigns. Similarly, the Australian Defence Force Trackers and War Dogs Association's War Dog Operational Medal recognizes her active presence in operational zones. The Purple Cross Award from the Australian Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals is perhaps the most eloquent testament to her moral stature. Being only the 10th animal in over 160 years to receive this high honor places Smoky in an elite category of animals whose actions saved human lives or provided exceptional humanitarian service. Furthermore, the institutional recognition of the Imperial War Museum in London and the World War II Museum in New Orleans places her within the grand narrative of military history, moving her beyond regional folklore into international historical scholarship. Displaying her bronze statue in a helmet and preserving her war blanket elevates her story to the level of artifacts and records that define the global conflict.
The creation of the permanent monument in Cleveland, Ohio, dedicated to Smoky and Dogs of All Wars, transforms her grave into a site of national commemoration. The efforts Bill Wynne went through to locate her original burial spot, placing her remains into a WWII ammunition case, provide a final, symbolic link between the intensity of her combat history and the peace of her final resting place. The monument ensures that the lessons learned from her extraordinary life about resilience, the necessity of morale, and the profound capability of therapy will continue to influence public memory and future medical practices. The narrative of Smoky, therefore, is not just a heartwarming anecdote, but a documented historical record that charts the evolution of animal involvement in human conflict, successfully making the argument that the smallest participant can yield the most significant results, both on the front lines and in the hospitals. Expansion: the human-animal bond in crisis management. The bond between Bill Wynne and Smoky provides a unique lens through which to examine crisis management and emotional regulation in extreme duress. Bill's immediate willingness to dedicate time and resources to Smoky's care in a war zone, bathing her daily in his helmet, scrounging specific rations, demonstrates a proactive mechanism for coping. Engaging in nurturing behavior toward an animal often serves as a powerful counterbalance to the constant proximity of death and destruction. The need to protect Smoky likely gave Bill a purpose extending beyond his direct military assignments, aiding his own mental stability. The response of the other soldiers is equally insightful. When Bill was confined to his bunk by seasickness during the perilous voyage home, his comrades risked regulation and punishment to form a protective ring around Smoky, just so she could have bathroom breaks on the upper deck. This collective responsibility for the dog underscores how deeply she had been integrated into the squadron's identity and emotional structure. She was not just Bill's dog, she was their shared source of comfort and luck. The men's willingness to risk disciplinary action reveals the immense value they placed on her survival and well-being, demonstrating the strength of the community bond formed around the animal. Even the conflict surrounding her repatriation served to highlight her importance. When confronted by the Navy officer and the threat of a $1,000 bond, a staggering sum for a returning corporal, Bill's unwavering commitment to accepting the terms spoke volumes. The official review of Smoky's service, culminating in the signing of the Declaration of Domestic Animal, was a tacit admission by the military hierarchy that some relationships transcend bureaucratic rules. The visual evidence of Smoky entertaining the troops, combined with the Red Cross testimony, constituted undeniable proof of her value as a force multiplier for morale, which ultimately weighed heavier than the transportation regulations. This historical episode provides strong support for the modern therapeutic use of animals. Smoky proved that animals can bridge communication gaps, provide unconditional acceptance, and facilitate healing environments. Her work demonstrated that focusing attention on a non-human entity can alleviate depression, anxiety, and the sense of isolation common among wounded and recovering service members. Her legacy is a historical blueprint for the establishment of formal therapy dog programs now common in hospitals and rehabilitation centers worldwide. Expansion: final review of the historical narrative. Smoky's narrative effectively encapsulates the often forgotten, smaller human stories within the vastness of World War II. The geographical movements tracked by the 26th Photo Recon Squadron mirror the slow, arduous path of the Allied victory in the Pacific. From the initial struggle in New Guinea to the critical battles for airfields in Biak and the invasions of the Philippines and Okinawa, Smoky was present, moving with the frontline forces. The specific details of her life, her diet of ham and bully beef, her helmet baths, the cramped musette bag travel, paint a visceral picture of wartime improvisation and resourcefulness. These small details make her story relatable and tangible, moving it beyond abstract history into lived experience. Furthermore, the eventual merging of the stories of Bill Wynne and Grace Guderian Heidenreich, confirming Smoky's identity as the lost dog Christmas, adds a layer of serendipity to the narrative. It underscores the sheer improbability of the encounter, that a tiny pet, lost by a nurse on one side of the island, was found by a photographer, adopted, and went on to become an international hero. This element of chance strengthens the perceived notion that Smoky was destined for a greater purpose, a good luck charm who earned her own fortune.
The longevity of Bill Wynne's devotion to Smoky, extending decades after her passing through his efforts to preserve her grave and memory, ensures that her historical record is complete and honored. His career as a photojournalist became a secondary narrative to his role as Smoky's chronicler and advocate, demonstrating the lifelong impact she had on his purpose. Ultimately, Smoky's story confirms that while war demands large-scale strategies and machinery, the resilience of the human spirit often hinges on the smallest, most personal forms of connection. She remains a compelling symbol of how unexpected heroes can emerge from the most desperate circumstances, leaving behind a legacy that continues to comfort and inspire.
Analyzing the importance of photographic reconnaissance.
Bill Wynne's role as an aerial photographer with the 26th Photo Recon Squadron provides a crucial military context for Smoky's partnership. The reconnaissance missions were strategically vital because they provided the intelligence necessary for all subsequent troop movements, bombardments, and invasion planning. These planes were intentionally unescorted and unarmed, prioritizing speed and stealth to avoid Japanese detection. This placed Bill and his crew in continuous, extremely high-risk situations. The high-stress nature of flying low over enemy targets, sometimes just 50 feet above ground in search of downed pilots or assessing battle damage, generated immense psychological pressure. It is in this context that Smoky's presence becomes a critical, non-verbal distraction from the reality of being a virtually defenseless spy in the sky. Her ability to perform simple tricks or just offer her presence acted as a grounding mechanism for the aerial crews, fostering camaraderie and easing the pervasive tension before and after missions. The fact that the crew willingly accepted Smoky, not as a burden, but as an essential element bringing good fortune, demonstrates the pragmatic acceptance of the therapeutic value of the animal within a life-or-death operational framework. Bill's initial justification that Smoky was a mascot who brought luck was sufficient to secure her inclusion, showcasing the deep-seated psychological need for talismans and morale boosters in combat. Therefore, Smoky's presence did not merely enhance the life of one corporal. She was an organic part of an elite, indispensable, and vulnerable reconnaissance unit. Her therapeutic function was directly contributing to the mental fitness and operational effectiveness of soldiers whose intelligence work was fundamental to the success of the island-hopping campaign across the Pacific. Expansion: the repatriation challenge as a test of value. The final struggle to bring Smoky back to the United States served as the ultimate test of her acknowledged value within the military system. The process of smuggling her aboard the USS General William H. Gordon in an oxygen-carrying case highlights the bureaucratic absurdity of military regulations versus the reality of human attachment. Bill's determination to keep her hidden, even while suffering from debilitating seasickness, underscores his commitment to their partnership. The subsequent dramatic announcements calling for the owners of dogs and monkeys created intense pressure. When Bill finally reported to the ship's office, the military leadership was faced with a choice: strictly enforce the rules or recognize demonstrable service. The fact that Bill arrived armed with photographic evidence of her work, combined with the official, documented testimony from the American Red Cross, was irrefutable. The threat of the $1,000 bond was a serious financial barrier, yet Bill accepted the risk instantly. This willingness to pay a huge sum for an animal emphasizes the immeasurable, non-monetary value Smoky represented, not just as a pet, but as a critical part of his identity and survival during the war. The ultimate outcome, the signing of the Declaration of Domestic Animal and the immediate permission for Smoky to perform shows on the deck, signaled a public and official victory for the human-animal bond. It signaled a formal recognition by the highest authorities on the ship that this specific dog was exempt from standard regulations due to her unique record of service. Even the fact that sailors then felt empowered to bring Randall's dog Duke up from the hold to play confirms that Smoky's success created a precedent for compassion among the troops. The journey home validated her status, not just as a lucky charm, but as a genuine war hero, whose contributions could not be discarded upon reaching American shores. Expansion: the enduring place in public memory. The continued remembrance of Smoky years after Bill Wynne's passing in 2021 at the age of 99 demonstrates the permanence of her place in history. The availability of detailed literary sources, combined with the multiple global memorials, ensures that her narrative remains current. The recognition from diverse organizations, from veterinary medical associations to Defense Force tracker units, illustrates that Smoky's story resonates across various specialized fields. For medical professionals, she is the pioneer of therapy work. For military historians, she is a case study in non-human operational utility. For the public, she is a symbol of loyalty and unexpected courage.
The placement of her memorabilia at Hickam Air Force Base, which houses the successor to her own 26th Photo Recon Squadron, connects the modern military to its history, providing current service members with a tangible link to the sacrifices and resourcefulness of their predecessors. The enduring statue in New Orleans and the exhibit in London ensure that international visitors learning about the Second World War are also introduced to the smaller, more tender aspects of the conflict. Smoky's narrative, detailed meticulously from her initial discovery in New Guinea to her final rest near Our Tree in Ohio, remains a profound example of how simple compassion can lead to extraordinary outcomes, securing her legacy as a genuine military and therapeutic icon.